Oh, I just had a mini eureka. If I say mini, maybe it's not arrogant. I just had a mini eureka about the past video, the how to lose patience with society. It's the day after, so this is another one of those. If I had thought of this, I would have included it in the video, but it's the day after I uploaded it. Apparently there's ways you can go back and throw things in a video once it's already uploaded, but I do not dare embark on any such mission. I'm not fudging with any of my videos once they're uploaded, unless I get a copyright strike for one of the music bits. But yeah, it's the day after, so I kind of would have included this if I'd still been putting that video together. I said about the empirical claims the cynics make. I didn't really judge them, but then in text I wrote, these are, eccentric claims. I guess I did judge them negatively when I said you have to have a catch-all conception of humanity to apply them to every single human, which the cynics clearly did, based on what survives of their writings, translations and all. I don't think they made any kinds of categorical, I don't think they split humans up in psychological classes the way many of the moderns do. And that's the weakest part, at least about the empirical aspects of cynicism, is that they would say this is true in a catch-all kind of way. But that's not what I'm trying to add here. What I simply want to add is that those claims, insofar as there's a class of humans of whom it rings true, how do we sum up those claims? If we're going to say the cynics were the original insert term, what's that term? I'm going to give you a second to think about it before I answer it myself. 3, 2, 1. The cynics were the original anti-frustrationists, because this is something that anti-frustrationism says. There's another aspect about the desires growing ad infinitum. Maybe that aspect ties itself enough into anti-frustrationism as well, but anti-frustrationism simply says that a preference satisfied is no different from a dispreference not eventuated to begin with. A preference satisfied is equally as good as a preference forsaken. That is, it is not even eventuated in the agent to begin with. A preference satisfied is every bit as good as it simply having been forsaken and not molded to begin with. And there's a lot of that in cynicism. That's why they were the OG anti-frustrationists, and we might even say OG minimalists, but I don't want to use a term like minimalism because there's too many weak minimalists, myself included. I'm a weak minimalist. I don't even abide by the minimalist criteria 100%, even though I recognize that it itself is weaker than the cynic criteria for all the things you have to forswear, all the possessions. I have possessions. My phone is my possession. If I lost just my phone, and not lost and simply lost and then not replaced it, if I set out to do that on purpose, I would not be psychologically well off. I'd miss my phone too much. So I can't even crack kind of Western, comfy minimalist standards of living frugally, let alone those original cynic standards that say you have to do that with every single possession. Maybe I can do it with a lot of my other possessions, but not my phone. Jesus, not my phone. You leave my phone alone, cynics. Much louder now. I'm by the shore. It's one of those ship sounds. Sounds kind of badass, actually. This is the only kind of ruckus that I do genuinely like in my audios. But I got my headphones on, so it may be a lot louder than I'm giving it credit for. Yeah, just an add-on about me telling the cynics, you leave my phone alone. I still admire it. I still wish that I could be the type of person who could renounce any possession once and for all, including all possessions, but in my case especially any possession, because I can so many other ones. But I wish there weren't these outliers like the phone. If I renounce my phone, I don't want to be the type of person who would then miss it greatly and for way too long. It would take me a long time to get accustomed to just never making use of my phone in the various ways I do, such as recording audios. But see, all of this is looped in insofar as it is a possession. The cynics and then the Stoics, who kind of reversed everything to a mental process, the cynics and the Stoics say that you have to craft yourself to be the kind of person where you won't miss that. It's about not missing goods, because they do belong to chance. Ultimately, the cynics played up the chance aspect much more so than the Stoics, but the cynics were more active. See, the Stoics were very passive in reducing everything to a mental process. The cynics were more active by saying, no, it's not enough that we merely regard these things as perfectly dispensable. We have to take active steps to make them dispensable in our lives by disposing ourselves of them. And I think that it doesn't matter what type of person you are, to what extent this rings true of you and what you need, what's custom fitted for your brand of person. You might have a brand of person as another way of referring to these different psychological classes, what John Haidt hypes up all the time. There's these different psychological classes. I would just take it to the first divide is introvert, extrovert. So maybe it's more true. Cynicism, the empirical side of it, is more true for introverts than it is for ambiverts and extroverts. But there's so many ways we can split up the human to separate classes. I would say, irrespective of where you fall, what kind of psychological bucket you fall into, this is something you should strive for. And you should see it at least true in that artistic sense. Maybe it's not empirically true because you value your comforts, your creature comforts that much, so you can't say it's empirically true of you, but it holds good from a wisdom standpoint, I think, because there's nothing more anti-Pavlovian if you understand the forces of nature as being something that an individual can kind of respond in Pavlovian ways too. A lot of this stuff has just been a kind of lab rat thing. You know, what is constructed is what you are responding in a Pavlovian way to, as the dogs did in the experiments. But I just take it further. It's like, what I can see myself being more or less Pavlovian in regard to me as an agent responding to forces of nature. even those ones that'll still end up causing me to act in the way I do out of just plain necessity, but nonetheless my mental process can be more skeptical of it because I don't want to be nature's Pavlov's dog, the way these dogs were Pavlov's dogs for the scientific experiment. I'm just saying, I just broaden it out. And so you should ask yourself both what type of person you are in reference to all these claims, and then finally, beyond everything else, you should still, no matter where you fall, you should see the beauty in refusing to be nature's Pavlov's dog, and thus trying to miss as few things as possible in life, ideally nothing, and being just very, very parsimonious with your love. Like I said in the Some Needs Are Hateful video, you know, a lot of this stuff really fits well with so much of the kind of either social commentary I've been doing, as well as, you know, finger wagging and kind of spitting ire at people like Jordan Peterson. So much of that just is buttressed by what the Cynics wrote about and the way the Cynics lived. So I want to just make that clear. And you should see wisdom in this, even if you're like the peak extrovert who doesn't feel that your desires grow ad infinitum. You're probably wrong about that, and you just can't see how they are growing, in fact. You know, it's not just something extroverts are guilty of, not seeing how their desires keep up even after fulfilled. It applies to me. It applies to me every time I get the urge to like upload the next video. I know there's no need for that. And every time I think that if I just get this next rant out, I'll be good. But after a while, whatever I'm ranting internally, I recorded, then it becomes an external rant available in audio form. And then I go, well, it's too good, I should upload it. So even this penchant for uploading is one of these desires that just grows ad infinitum. I'm never going to be satisfied with a rant such that 10 months from then, I won't be hankering to upload the next thing. But there's no tangible reason for it in any sense, other than this, you know, treating my YouTube channel as a kind of digital eulogy space. But it's a non-necessity, and yet I can't relinquish it. So you just start viewing so many things, even things that you view kind of nobly, you still see that critical side of them and that desire intrusive side of them. You know, I think it's noble to talk about high-minded topics in public, but nonetheless, I'm like, I should be satisfied more of the time than I am in terms of once the rant has been released. But then I just start conjuring up new material and producing new material, and the need I feel to actually get it out there publicly, that itself is where I need to be more critical of. And maybe I should make this my last video. But see, just as I can't relinquish my phone ASAP, or probably for the rest of my life, I won't be able to say with enough confidence that I can make this my last video. I'd miss getting videos out there just as I'd miss my phone. There's these things that we'd all miss if we lost them, and it's more admirable to craft ourselves to be the types of people who wouldn't, either by living out that way or doing what the Stoics did. Now that's all very well and good, but we have to take note of the date. It is August 24th. I have no business going on and creating this much when I know there's all that stuff from before. So now let's travel back to July something like the first half of July. Let's travel back to the first half of July when I recorded a bunch of stuff and put it under the banner, "Hard work is gay." I dare not title the video that way because something homophobia, but that's going to be one of these tags I do is "Hard work is gay." I said a lot. It's a bit noisy at the very start, and then it's just, in fairness, it's kind of noisy throughout, but it's still worth bringing up because it kind of follows from what I've been saying thus far. But no more specific references to Cynics and Stoics, at least for a while. I don't know if I bring them up later in these recordings, but you get a reprieve from it, and I start talking about promotions. So this is first half of July stuff. Oh, and in that first half of July stuff, there, as in here, as in the previous video, apart from the jogs and perhaps the occasional shift recording, like all these recordings, I'm outside, and I understand there's ruckus, and I appreciate those who put up with the ruckus. Just wanted to say that. But I kind of love that I'm on this roll of just recording outside. I say at some point that air is still good here. That no longer rings true as of August 20th. So that's another kind of drawback to sitting on audios for so long. And this other, sometime in July audios, I say, air is still good here, because I knew the wildfires were in effect. But I'm going to have to visually correct that in that recording, because for a good 4 or 5 days now, no, it cannot be said that air is still good here. But at least the southern interior thing is starting to get better now. 30,000, now probably up to 50,000, but the last headline I looked, 30,000 people from the southern interior of this lovely province of British Columbia were evacuated last time I glanced at the headlines. And it's going to take a lot for them to rebuild their home. So I just want a kind of moment of consideration, because I guess I am parochial after all. I just want a moment of consideration for those poor people from the southern interior through no fault of their own. Lost their homes, had to be evacuated, leave everything behind, renounce for once all possessions. Not on purpose, but specifically for these reasons, that we are warned by the Cynics and indeed the Stoics that they belong to chance. All these things, they belong to chance. But then Shop says, the will does not allow itself to be played with. If you merely regard them as perfectly dispensable, that doesn't mean that you will tacitly feel that way, or even just tangibly, expressly feel that way once they are taken from you. You actually have to live that way as the Cynics did. God, I am saying more things about the Cynics and the Stoics now, because it just, these things like these wildfires make it so clear that, any one of us could be next. We should miss as little as humanly possible. We should strive toward a life where we miss as little as humanly possible. The Stoics didn't get it fully right. They were mere braggers. Because they wanted to reduce everything to about how the object in the external world is regarded. Well, heaven help me. I'm at a park. It's very noisy here. Trains, everything. But even though it's no spot for an audio, I got to do it right now. As I always excuse myself when I'm unprepared in terms of my conditions for an audio, I always self-excuse it as, I've got to do it now or I'll forget. I probably won't forget, but I feel like I have to say it right now. In the past, I've discouraged chasing the promotion. I've discouraged it in so many videos, I never want to visit upon it again, because I've said all that I can say, or so I thought. Starting about a month ago, I was starting to realize that there was probably the most important reason why I discourage people chasing promotions, keeping promotions, being overemployed, we might call it. Individuals who would subsist just fine and maybe even live comfortably just fine, have roughly similar standard of living, were they to simply forego their promotions. The main reason is your promotion is very likely, if it's white-collar work and in many other kinds of work, splitting collars. I'm not too comfortable splitting with collars, just like I'm not too comfortable using terms like working class, because the elites work so much harder, but simply because they earn a hell of a lot more. We're not supposed to think of them as members of the working class. It's so ridiculous. So I don't want to split by color, and I don't want to split by class. There's different sense of class depending on what continent you're on, and sometimes even what country you're in. There's different sensibilities of what class is. Not even theories, just sensibilities. This is pretty theoretical, and it so varies. But no matter what class you are, very few classes are exempt from this. If we are going to use the term class, it's just very likely going to turn you into a liar. And we don't even see how it's so subtle. People don't even realize they go into these lying modes. It's so evident. It's so evident what the main issue is. With a lot of the failure that's been happening within my industry, and especially my department, it's so obvious. And it's the nature of the contract. Certain people overpromised. Certain people were willing to hear what was clearly an exaggeration because they so wanted to find someone who will overpromise because of their own shortcomings. This is the befooling and the befooled. I just connected it now. I was thinking, like, how can I clinch this corporate mayhem? I can't get into details, but there's corporate mayhem ever since the pandemic because of the high turnover rate and the lowering of standards. This is about the befooling and the befooled. People who overpromise, but were somehow able to shove it out of their brain because they view this as business. And so they overpromise. Those who can realize it's a lie, or at best a massive exaggeration and likely prone to continuous failure, those who can hear this refuse to hear it. Thus, the contract gets created as such, and we end up with a lot of shortcomings and all kinds of staff shortages because we just overpromise in terms of manpower or person power. Yeah, I'm wondering why manpower hasn't gone yet. Jesus, the things that come up when I just start letting myself talk. I've never thought about that. They've, turned a lot of these other things around. But manpower is still a term that is unproblematic. How strange. Give it a year. So the moment I get into this middle managerial mayhem, which I dipped my toe in. That was well over a decade ago, and I dipped my toe out of it immediately. The moment you get into it, you're going to be primed to lie about certain things and not even realize you lied. There's no way, with my emphasis on sincerity and earnestness, I wouldn't last a week because I would just always reduce it to the ultimate factor. The ultimate factor is the nature of the contract. No one can say that. There's been these meetings and they always just hem and haw. I skip them when it's a full-blown team meeting, when it's obligatory. But I didn't used to skip them, and I know how the one-on-one meetings go. They go just like the team meeting goes. And there's a lot of hemming and hawing instead of getting to the fact that the contract needs to change. The contract absolutely needs to change. No one's willing to say it because money's involved, and the people who spend money overspend it without true consequences to them as individuals. The consequences may allot to the organization. The consequences don't allot in terms of blame to the individuals who are willing to be fooled. It's corporate mayhem from A to Z, and yet I'm supposed to want to be promoted because it would help me earn more? I don't need to earn more. I can go down to 2 days. Unless I'm going to be dragged kicking and screaming successfully into a second mortgage, which I can put my foot down on that, but I'm still being open-minded enough. Putting my foot down means no 2 days for me, still 4 days. But one thing I will not do is accept a single hour over 32 hours worked per week. I will not ever do that in my life again. I don't care what kind of a mansion you can promise me as a result of doing it. I think in terms of minutes and hours. I do not think in terms of dollars and cents. And I can't maintain even a modicum of generosity or good-spiritedness along those who think in terms of dollars and cents. And it's so baked in their psychology. And so even without the meeting factor, like how I would have to lie in meetings if I were to crawl my way up the managerial ladder, because I would have to pretend it's not the main issue. The ultimate issue is not the nature of the contract and that it's some local issue, some screw up or some mishap from the previous day, and so underperformed. Of course so-and-so underperformed. We expanded beyond our any semblance of our maximal capacities. We expanded. There was no need for it, but it meant good people moved on up. And we were stuck with a haphazard come-and-go system where so many people came and went. I was there for it all. I saw it all. Luckily, it didn't impact me at the heart of my central spot. So I'm mainly just, I'm doing my own thing, and I'm not trying to think about work too much. But here it's relevant because my point is, There's all these intrinsic, extrinsic motivations. Yes, you should think about your willingness to be promoted along those lines, along the lines of your sleep necessity, along the lines of your stress. How prone are you to stress as a unique individual, as a unique psychology? There's all those reasons. But then the main reason, I never mentioned it before, is in all likelihood, climbing that managerial ladder, it entails learning how to lie and not even catch yourself lying. It makes its way like a spiked drink. Wow. It makes its way like a spiked drink into your psychology. It's odious and unnecessary. And that was the other thing. The extent to which the standards have plummeted is best shown by the fact that I didn't renew my license this year. We go through a rigorous process to have our annual license renewed so we can be actually legally employed in the industry. And the reason I forgot about it is because they didn't send me any reminders. They always send me reminders. There was a period where they were sending me reminders 90 days out that I have to do what I have to do, undergo a certain mental, rigorous testing process and pass with almost like flying colors to have my license renewed. And this year, I totally forgot about it because they didn't email me about it. Last year, they only emailed me once, 30 days in advance. This year, zero. So I forgot about it. It expired. I shouldn't have worked. I got it renewed by now, but I had to take initiative. If I had taken initiative, it expired in April. Right now, it's July 18th. If I hadn't taken initiative, the standards have so plummeted, and the thinning of the admin capacity has so impacted the nature of the business and the nature of the daily ongoings that if I hadn't taken initiative to renew it, I still wouldn't have gotten any kind of warnings. No one would have realized. The other reason I forgot it is because I thought maybe there was a good chance that last year I did the 2-year renewal, which I should have known better. The 2-year renewal just means double the rigorousness of the testing process. Why would I want to do that? If I could actually thin it into per month, and so it's 12 times easier, but I have to get it renewed every month, at the end of every month, I'd so totally take him up on that offer if the testing process could indeed be 12 times easier compared to the annual one. So forget about the 2-year one. I should have known. I'd never pick that. So yeah, don't strive for promotions unless you're, destitute. And even if you're destitute, God, when you look at what the Cynics did, that's another chapter I got to read out of Shop. They were destitute. They lived in the now, and they mostly jested around. They were sincere individuals. And if they could do it through poverty, and they begged, and if poverty didn't absolutely crush their spirits, there's a good chance that we're all just overestimating the necessity of keeping privation always at bay through any kind of method, even a 4-day work week. Maybe if I just quit, and if I lost even this place, and if I just ended up begging the way the Cynics did, maybe my psychology would actually change for the better. These men were advisors of their day, as the Shop chapter gets into at length. They were the kind of publicly spirited, all too detached and thus prudent advisors of the public good as they were seen in their times. The Cynics. I'm not going to say the Cynics got everything right, but as you can see right now, Cynics Were Always Right is a track, but then I do another track with a record I'll flash right now, I guess, called Cynics Were Wrong on Soap. And here the term cynic is used in a kind of dual way. One is the very specific one, which is in terms of cynics were wrong on soap. In the previous record, when I say cynics were always right, I just mean people who are kind of arrogantly smug about how much they hate humanity. Those kinds of cynics. Cynics like me. But I'm not an actual, in the strictest sense of the philosophical term, I'm not a cynic. If I were a cynic, I'd give up the job so I can live the good life. In true alignment with my psyche. That would be the good life, even if it would mean I would have to beg, because it would instill certain kinds of humility in me that could maybe get me to have my ego plummet just a little bit if I had to be a beggar and wear stuff like the Hairshirt. God, as uncomfortable as it would be, I've only ever tried them. I've had to take them off after 10 minutes. The Hairshirt, which is the ascetic kind of go-to self-punishment, that deliberate seeking of the disagreeable and even the repulsive. I've got to read up on that too, because Shop wrote about that brilliantly, and why it makes sense from the standpoint of the turning away of the will. Let me repeat that, because the garbage truck just passed me. The turning away of the will. Well, I'm still not at my destination, but I had another hefty round, and so I want to add, because I left off talking about the Hairshirt as that which assists in the denial of the will to live, the turning away of the will. The Hairshirt is quite the accessory, and I couldn't last more than 10 minutes in it. Granted, I tried it during the summer. Maybe I'll have better results at some other season, but 10 minutes is all I could take, and I want to... There's so much more that could be said about these admirable people who did stuff like wear the Hairshirt all their life long, or if the accounts are to be trusted, most of their lives. I guess no one can be said to have worn it all their life, but there have been people who wore the Hairshirt maybe not all their life long. That's where I was setting myself up for, but I'm kind of winding up a little too high. Nonetheless, I can't help but start thinking about how god-awful chest hair is. The few times that I've grown out my chest hair, it didn't feel as bad as the Hairshirt, but it's definitely similar enough to serve as a justifiable springboard for me now to complain about masculinity dupes who think that chest hair is awesome, where in fact chest hair is awful. You have to be so in denial about its hedonic effects. There's no way any boy who was accustomed to not having chest hair for 12 or 13, 14, however many goddamn years. With me, I don't remember ever feeling it prior to my 20s. Luckily, but some men would say no, unluckily. It's like chest hair in every single hedonic sense is just awful. And yet there are those who would pine for it. And if they could raise their tea specifically with the concurrent effect being more chest hair, they'd sign up for that. I'm not saying that there's any such necessary connection, but if I could just have a magic wand or a cosmic lever or whatever and just pull it, wave it, and I never grow chest hair again. Just as with the beard, just as with the many other kinds of anatomical or physiological changes, if I just never have to take a dump again. See, I view the decision as non-par. If I could just make it so that no more chest hair grows on me, it's every bit as prudent as the willingness to change myself and reach a kind of soma by way of, let's have my soma make me not have to take a piss or a shit anymore ever again. That's all win. And yet there are men who pine for the chest hair because they've been indoctrinated into thinking that they care about their masculinity. They have these theories of masculinity, and they think the theory boils down to something other than exhibitive thirst. And I'm going to flash that record right now. See, this is the usefulness of these records. You can always end up getting around. You always reach the new destination that is loosely related to your previous destination. Exhibitive thirst theory. What other theory of masculinity makes sense? Then masculinity is a way in which a man exhibits his thirst for women and thus makes himself more available or more visible. Well, for once, the wind ruining the rest of the audio is not going to bother me all that much because I shouldn't be going on about gender stuff like exhibitive thirst theory as a theory of masculinity. That's just not this video. I will say much more about it and expand on it, but I've got like a 4-hour video in the making on gender stuff at this rate. No need to talk about that further. It's just hard to resist having referenced the Hairshirt and then to not segue to, well, first, chest hair is awful, but I should at least cover my bases and provide a quick summary of the Hairshirt. So I've got it queued up here. Hairshirts are garments made from rough animal hair, usually that of a goat's, worn as a top or under a shirt against the skin, so the coarse hair will rub and scratch the wearer. The discomfort serves both an act of penitence and a constant reminder of faith, so as to better avoid the temptation to sin. So that's how it's told, but I think that, it's something I'll say. I'll be nice to the Hairshirt, even though it's been historically used primarily as a religious tool. I think there's a secular variant, certainly. I just like to see everyone who's ashamed of being imaginative, who doesn't even know they're ashamed of being excessively imaginative, or they're on their way to being, quote-unquote, excessively imaginative. I'd like to see everyone there as a secular reappropriation of the Hairshirt. Just don the Hairshirt, and just as in religious context, it assists with avoiding the temptation to sin, in my secular telling, it'd be used as a constant reminder to not care that all of society essentially screams, you can't indulge your imagination because you ought to be productive, or some other substitute where they'll condition you into thinking that there's just something untoward about what they would say is excessive imaginative fun. Whereas I'm
I'm all about the imaginative fun. And I see this because I see just how much I owe to music. And this includes all the times I'm not listening to music in the moment, but the song lingers in my mind. And so just as of late, I'm considering how naturally this comes to me, how it makes boredom utterly impossible. I forget the last time I felt bored. It was certainly before I was 10, because I'd been doing this for that long. It makes boredom just absolutely almost inconceivable. And the fact that people get bored at all leads me to believe that they are incapable of inwardly reconstructing even their favorite songs, and just having the songs run as the background of their cognitive software, just audibly reconstructing their favorite songs or full records, just strictly inwardly, with zero assistance from the outward inputs, like zero actual instruments running in the background. None of that. This is purely internal. None of that. Just you being in touch with the ideal and in testing the depths of your imagination, having pushed yourself and your ingenuity and your memories to their limits in these, what I would say is just transformative ways, self-transformative ways. There's nothing more tedious about this society, and indeed deep society, because I don't want to pin the blame on all of society, so I should always qualify it. There's nothing more tedious about deep society than the fact that it places emphasis on these imminent things like productivity in indirect conflict with certain values, my values certainly, values that recognize the worthiness of imagination and really the irreplaceability of imagination. If you want to be a self-reliant person, you're going to be a person who's cultivated your imagination. Not productivity or esteem, no, but rather cultivating imagination for as many people as possible. That's a societal project that I'd sign off on. Give me a party to vote for that cultivates individual imagination to the max, even at the cost of other so-called, creature comfort values. Cultivating imagination for as many people as possible, the greatest good for the greatest number, so it can be a quasi-utilitarian thing. Such that all those people don't need, these communal societal gimmicks, just to bear through their own existence, their mundane, their dour, certainly unimaginative, dull existence, so that they might reach the basic level, what to me now seems like the basic level. I can't remember where this has not been anything but basic, but a level where they can just effortlessly pass the time with nothing going on around them. Easiest way and go-to method for me, you know how to make your favorite songs and art forms, but with me, in the case of music, you know how to make them just run on loop, just all your favorites. I can do it with entire records, truly hit every note throughout the entire record. There's got to be hundreds of records I'm able to do this with, because I've re-listened to them that many times, and when I see how people, within 10 seconds of listening to a song that I recommend them, they think they're in a position to dismiss it. It's like, how can I have anything other than disdain for them? So I just have this ability to recreate music in my own mind. This is one of many ways I can pass the time, even if I were in, what do they call it? Solitary confinement. I can do this. It beats concerts by a mile, though in all fairness, I've only been to 2 concerts my whole life. But what I do just internally, thanks to my imagination, it beats concerts by a mile. And I went to see my favorite group both times. And I just have more fun, especially when I'm blazed, just reconstructing these songs. But I'm less dependent on society as a result, so that's a good thing. Certainly a stoical thing, in line with Stoicism. Conjuring stories as well. As I'm doing this, I combine the storytelling with the music, either novel stories from scratch or involving people. Assuming you've done this, maybe you can identify, you conjure stories involving people you've met and known really well, and how they interact with you. Or if it's not from scratch, it's these other kind of adaptation stories where it's as if you've successfully hacked the creative team of a show, the screenwriters and directors, and you just improve upon a show. It's kind of what the example from scratch is what I did with Natalist Gulag, but then the example with the show is I've got a separate upload in the works about how to end South Park. It was brilliant, but I'm going to save that for a different video. So yeah, it can be these adaptation style stories or stories from scratch where you've just You just improve upon things that exist that you're a fan of, but that you've maybe noticed them starting to dip in terms of creativity. But you're at your creative peak. I guess it's called fanfic, but it shouldn't be separated from the musical replication endeavors, because when the two merge as a byproduct of one's highly resourceful imagination, you'll know it's the highlight of your day. Is when you create that, when you hit that creative peak involving your favorite art forms, in my case, music and fanfic. That so few people are aware of their capacity for this, with all the potential for personal growth it carries. I mean, it just shows me they have next to nothing in the way of imagination and inward development. Because they've been goaded, and really they've been goaded and ill-served by a society and a dull gravity, starting with the school system. They've just been conditioned to forget all about the gift of imagination and to almost be ashamed of whatever excesses or, within their own clan, the comparative excesses of imagination they might have, the few of them. It's a sad state of affairs. Certainly, if you value individuality and ideation, it's a sad state of affairs. But if you value productivity and the next gadget, or what do they have that everyone's talking about? Chat GPT 4000. I mean, I just don't care. I can't conceive of someone who would even be motivated to download the first Chat GPT, let alone all these. Let's get every single iteration and modification of it. I just don't care. I'm swinging higher. It's just true, and I see it more with each passing month. And I'm doing it thanks to my imagination. I'm swinging higher, and it's just dulling the rest of the world to my perception evermore. I just remember these tales of expats. These are tales told in the West. I just remember these tales of expats who drop to their knees and weep tears of joy when they flee their oppressive nation, which is rightly to be called oppressive. But nonetheless, they flee their oppressive nation of birth and become expats and arrive to the West and see all the varieties of consumer choice in the supermarkets. This is represented as feel-good stuff. Like, we should almost weep along with the subject of the story. Whereas all I'm seeing is another fool, the befooling of yet another person who now clearly qualifies for the Pascal's quote, right? However it went. The Pascal's quote where all of man's troubles stem from the fact that he cannot sit quietly and be alone with his own thoughts for 5 minutes. I think it was 5 minutes. And that just molds all the imbecilic concerns of society, because it's just people need spectacle and gimmicks and chicanery and charade and many other terms. But you know what? I think this is. I think I've overdone myself at this point. I was supposed to give a bit more of a contextualization of the Hairshirt, and look where I ended up. But frankly, there's not that much more to be told about the Hairshirt, certainly by me. I just need to kind of return to it because the whole pro-imagination rant and let's have abstract conceptions not just be used for these mundane means ends purposes. Let's train ourselves in terms of abstract conceptions, sophisticated abstract conceptions, such that they can improve even upon our perceptive faculties. Man, when those two join, that's where you get the genius. I gotta stop, or I'm gonna imply once again that I think myself genius. I would not wanna imply that. Heavens no. But the Hairshirt is to be used if you're in this secular way that I want it to be used. If you're ashamed of your quote unquote excessive imagination, if when you hear in a show where the kid is daydreaming, and that just truly does happen in real life that much more frequently than even depicted in the shows. But these shows, God, I can list dozens of them. They're about kids and the kids in the classrooms, and every single time the kid is daydreaming, the teacher tells him to straighten up and pay attention to what they need to and quit daydreaming. Where it's like, I just remember in my own context, in my own history, what I was daydreaming about was so much more conceptually fruitful, and I would dare say intellectually beneficial in terms of molding my perceptive faculties. You get abstract concepts right, you improve upon your perceptive faculties. What I was daydreaming about, not always, but most of the time, was so much more fruitful and truly useful to me as an individual than whatever mantra or formula or incidental bit of knowledge that can only make me useful was being spoken to by the teacher on the board or described by the teacher in some other kind of bricks over clicks mechanism. It's like, I was wronged. I was wronged by being led into bricks over clicks. And it led me ever so briefly to even doubt the main point I'm telling here, is that no, imagination is all win. It's an unalloyed good. It doesn't mean I'm ready to say that worrying about productivity on a society-wide level is an unalloyed bad. But you know what? These pundits, they never take into account stuff like imagination, stuff like how often do people sleep now that we're happy that unemployment is down. How much do people sleep less now? Can we measure some of these things for once? Stress levels, time spent at leisure refining one's conceptual life and schemes. Not real ends, ideal ends. These pundits never ask these questions. They don't care about imagination or your sleep whatsoever. They're looking at their narrow, the stupid charts and graphs and figures and economic data. And they're hijacking your interests, pretending they don't even exist by presenting unemployment being down as an unalloyed good. It might be more good than bad, but it's not an unalloyed good. And so, yeah, if you're ashamed of your imagination, wear the fucking hair shirt. And I wish I could make all these pundits wear the hair shirt for my ends, for once. I never get my way. I should be able to get my way for once, and everyone I'm judging negatively has to wear the hair shirt for at least one day out of the year. Call it the no avail day. And it's amazing what a good sport I am, seeing as how I never get my way in terms of actually feeling invited to the policy discussion debate. It's fine. I almost don't even expect it. It's just when I see people who are so much more within the Overton window portray themselves as being these outsiders, that's really when I get sore about it. Because they have such high expectations, they're less poorly served by the Overton window as it is, and yet they always bitch and whine and moan as if they're the ones who have been cast out. It's like, compared to me, you've not been cast out that much. There is no avail day. There never will be. And that's fine. It's just, it's not fine when I get comparative and when people portray themselves as greater victims of the Overton window. No, you're not. You guys really are not. Many of you who call yourselves populist or whatever you want to call yourselves, you're really not that far out of the picture because you never bring up the concerns I have. Concerns over imagination and the like. Like governments, usually when they make some horrific, when they act in a way that results in crimes against humanity, they often take very long to apologize for what they've done. We can think about the internment camps. I think that's the example that crops up in people's imagination the quickest, when it's something the government did, a well-known government like the American government. And so in World War II, you had the domestic Japanese population, whether they were expats or whether they were natives of America, to the extent that they were of Japanese descent, they were rounded up. And then decades later, I forgot exactly when, I think the state of California specifically apologized to them in the late 80s. But I also think just as a federal matter, just the national government of America did this formal apology, right? And so that was the right thing to do. But see, I was wrong in specific ways, and yet it would never occur to me to actually expect one such apology, because the way I was wrong is milquetoast compared to how all those individuals were wronged, purely on the basis of their Japanese descent. But can I get maybe 1/10 of a commemoration as an autodidact, as someone who doesn't need external gimmicks to pass the time to amuse myself, and yet who was hurried into these systems that assume that I am one such person who's going to be well served by not just teach me how to read, write, and a few other things, and then let me do my own stuff. No, they felt that they needed to teach me that much more, right? So the gravity of my being wrong, and individuals who are like me, the gravity of it is far less than the gravity of something like those, crimes against humanity and violations of human rights, usually in wartime. So I don't need some ultra solemn apology, which is usually just LARPed anyway. If people actually feel that when, their group is has been prejudiced against in the past, prejudiced against, that's not a word, when they feel that members of their group, their rights have been violated in the past, and when these governments usually decades later apologize for those crimes, if you feel better about that because you think this is some individual is actually feeling sincerely remorseful, you're a dupe. It's performative, but nonetheless, it strikes me just like they will never, people who are like me and who feel wrong the way I do, it never occurs to them all their life long to even expect that maybe there could be something that's 1/10 as remorseful, that's publicly acted out and performed in an apologetic tone. Like, yes, here we will apologize to all the autodidacts whose parents we forced to force them to go to school under these laws that punish parents to the extent that they choose to not have their kids go to either a public schooling system or who then don't homeschool them either. It's like, I'm not just saying I shouldn't have been strung along into a public school system till the ripe age of 17 under the threat of having my parents go to prison if they choose not to force me to do that. But I'm saying, even if that hadn't been the case, my parents also had no right to homeschool me because this clicks over bricks thing was well underway back then too. But see, that's not how the issue is conceived of. No one who says like, okay, let's have my kid be taken out of public school system. No one tolerates that. The only way they'll tolerate it if those parents will then themselves homeschool the kid. But at 17, I'd say I was certainly capable of browsing the net and finding my own information and being self-taught thanks to these clicks. And so, yeah, where's the apology for individuals like us? I understand the apology will always be performed and LARPed, but nonetheless, it'd be interesting to see what would even happen if I were to propose one such thing. Not an apology on the gravity and solemnity of these war crimes, like the Japanese internment camps, nothing like that, but just something that's 1/10 as potent as that. If I were to propose one such apology, I'd be laughed out of court. I'd be laughed out of the public platform, the podium. And that's one of the many reasons, but this is kind of the keynote reason as to why I've gone full-blown post-impartialist. If the majorities and the so-called rebels cannot even conceive of my interests and respect them to the point where this wouldn't be laughed out of court, why should I afford them the same respect? I won't. I don't think of it as coincidental that no one in the framing of the establishment and anti-establishment, institutionalist versus anti-institutionalist, the old wise establishment versus the renegades, all these framings, populist, elitist, all these framings, like no one here is challenging truancy laws where, if parents who have kids, if their kids don't attend school, it's whatever the sufficient degree is, it varies locally, those parents can get in very serious legal trouble and in the worst of cases serve time. But I'm told that there's these outsiders ideologically who are not shy from being legal outsiders as well, convert legal norms, and that's just so threatening. But it's like, what's to be preserved? An Overton window where like the idea you're going to challenge truancy because it's like so conventionally assumed that the scholastic molding is the right molding for the individual in a one-size-fits-all way. That's why no one questions truancy laws. If anything, they're clamping down on support for charter schools, which just the regimen is just that much longer and it just deducts that much more from the pupil's post-scholastic life. There's no one challenging these scholastic norms. And it's not at all coincidental also that the school week is 5 days, and likewise the work week is 5 days. And so get you really accustomed that early on to view it as deviance to not wish to get up 5 days out of the week and not just get up and stay awake, but then truly hustle out of your apartment to get to play sex, to fulfill these so-called obligatory tasks that keep society running. Not if you're the cynic. And certainly even if you're of the most ordinary minimalist variety. A lot of the reasons people get up and hustle and do all this stuff, that may impact extravagant people. If those sort of cycles stop cycling, that's going to only impact the truly extravagant. The more extravagant you are, the more that's going to impact you. And no one's telling this story. And all the pundits who on some level know this story can be told but choose not to tell it, that truly we're worrying about growth because there's a lot of extravagant people who need to live extravagantly and who look at cynicism as a fool's philosophy instead of looking to aspire to it to whatever extent. How many pundits will say this? No, they're the very pundits who don't question truancy laws. They're the very pundits who don't think about the so-called incidental nature of the fact that the school system, the school week is 5 days and the work week is 5 days. Get you accustomed early on to thinking that you're the deviant for wanting to stay comfy in your bed. And even if everyone did it, even if you apply that Kantian categorical imperative that everyone else wills in the way you do, well, yeah, we'd have a lot less in the way of defense, but we'd also have a lot less in the way of truly motivated enemies. And so we wouldn't need things like defense, and we wouldn't need to worry about Chinese growth compared to our growth. There'd be enough laid-back people in the world and people who value imagination, and so I would will one such thing. That everyone was dispositionally the way I am. I don't feel hungry every morning, both literally to eat early. I eat like 7 or 8 hours after I wake up, and I also don't feel hungry to get up and seize the day. I don't need conquest. I need to stay in my bed and sleep until I'm no longer sleepy, which the work week does not afford me, which the school week did not afford me, and to the extent that these things are presented as unalloyed goods by the punditocracy, I'm going to be increasingly salty. Look how the school system closure thing from a couple of years ago, look at the fallout of that. Do all these parents truly believe that their kids are now going to have a lifetime setting back in terms of their educational opportunities? Do these parents not realize it's clicks? We're in a world of clicks, not bricks. See how that whole DeSantis did the right thing by opening the schools early. DeSantis did the right thing. It's like whatever you believe in terms of the medical establishment should not impact your opinions here. That is a preposterous take that no one in the punditocracy tackles. That the idea that the only way students can learn is when they're in the school system, in the digital age. The imbecility of this means that I am absolutely justified in saying that they ought to wear the fucking Hairshirt. Every single one of these people. You don't question truancy laws, I want you wearing the Hairshirt. If you don't question the fact that both the school and the work week are 5 days, and they get you so accustomed early on into thinking that you're the deviant for not wanting to inconvenience yourself because you're not a morning person, if you don't question this stuff, like these are our interests being weighted down. The pundit who makes no mention of this deserves the Hairshirt. I'm going to be increasingly salty about this stuff, especially the more I incorporate some of the ancient thought that certainly would have viewed all of this as an absurdity, if not a pathology. This growth mindset, and both in terms of the individual needs to constantly grow in some societal measurable respect. Like an institution needs to measure how I perform as a human being. No, an institution doesn't need to measure how I perform as a human being. I can perform great, but in ways that are really hard to measure institutionally. Certainly in a growth-minded society's institutional framework. The more I read the ancients, the more I'm realizing they would have seen absurdities and pathologies in this societal setup as well. So I'm spitting some ire. Get used to it. It doesn't mean that all growth is always bad, or that, any particular ideology, economic ideology, would make a difference here. To the extent that non-capitalist economic ideologies have been tried, they've always strived to compete with capitalism and thus grow. So in practice, there's no substitute that's workable. Any substitute, it's merely going to be, any substitute that's not based on growth, it's going to be the equivalent of an economic cult that may be allowed to practice its thing insofar as it remains very small and doesn't form a significant voting bloc. But then again, we'd be wrong to vote. If those who are inspired by the Cynics and the ascetics and the Stoics, if they decided to form a single voting bloc on the basis of trying to revert society to that would be wrong too. We just traumatize way too many people. So there's no legal remedy to this. There's only earnest attempts at persuasion. I would not want to organize even if I had the numbers to. Because we just traumatized that many people. If we made up a plural majority, the biggest of the plural majorities, and we could enact our societal reversion process, degrowth, because we're just not amused by the gadget, it would still be wrong to do so. We just traumatize that many people. There's that many people who believe that, like, even not having air conditioning means communism is about to be ushered in. So there's just no way. There's too many people who are way too on that push-pull spectrum, and they can't see anything outside that spectrum. And I'd rather not traumatize all such people. People who something world economic boredom. Yes, I will call it boredom every time, because that's exactly what it is. On second thought, instead of ending the video with a snide, snarky remark like that, world economic boredom, it's a track. So, like what I said earlier, you just talk for long enough, you're gonna make your way to a track just purely accidentally. That's how many tracks I have. But world economic boredom, instead of ending with that, I just want to point people to a podcast. I believe it's from 2021. It's by Ezra Klein. I forgot his guest's name. I just know that here when I referenced not wanting to be measured by an institution, if an institution's framework is wide enough that it encompasses whatever my merits and demerits are at their peak or at their nadir, absolutely, have it apply. I just don't see any institution. It's really hard to get some of this stuff. And a podcast that goes into that, they talk about point systems and they talk about the pros and cons of some of the arguments I'm making, but they very much land on, and there's more pros to what I'm saying here, obviously, in terms of how I'm telling it. I don't know if they would sign off on, but just the role of point systems in this society. It's Ezra Klein. It's a podcast. I forget his guest's name. It was from a couple of years ago. They described the whole thing really crisply, and so that's my one recommendation to end this video. But yes, I did say world economic boredom because I think a lot of you are nuts.
I had a girl come up to me last night. She said, I started cleaning up my room, and it completely changed my life. She said, your room is the externalization of your mind. And that's right. That's exactly true. To the degree that you're in your room, the room is you. Now, that's how people think. That's okay. It doesn't matter if they think that way. That's how it is. So, straighten up what you can straighten up and quit saying things that make you feel weak. And then you'll know what to do next. Clean up your room. Clean up your room. Clean up your room. Clean up your room.
God, this Jordan Peterson. Stop saying things that make you feel weak. I'm not listening to the audiobook. I'm just listening to the remix, Spirit of the Father remix. He's just one of the recurring things that are cycled in there in terms of his motivational bits is stop saying things that make you feel weak. Whereas well, how about examine why you feel weak and get to the root of it? It's not like try to circumvent it by not saying things that you might think are true. Simply because they make you feel weak, you shouldn't say them. That's his advice. Stop saying things, or I guess implicitly, stop believing things that make you feel weak. Whereas I would just say, interrogate why you feel weak, and it might just have a valid, but hopefully an invalid root. But it's like he just wants to kind of circumvent it so that people even block out that there may have some infirmities. What a tool. Okay, lest I give an incomplete picture, he's not all bad in this. Some parts of this actually are a little motivating, like this one. I'm ending with this.
My sense is that if you want to change the world, you start from yourself and work outward.
Work outward.
Work outward.
He says work outward.
My sense is that if you want to change the world, you start from yourself and
More of this. Less piety. And Jordan just might crawl back into my good books. Of course, this is an anomaly. He wants you dependent. Insofar as he wants you hitched, he wants that naked codependence. But in his best moments, he does say work outward. So praise be upon him for his occasional exceptional talk. But wow, I'm loving this whole thing. You guys gotta check it out. It's JPB Wave, Father, full album. Meaning Wave. Oh dear Lord, I can't end on that happy note because this gets so bad the longer it goes. Just listen.
With someone that you can trust, that maybe has a future. That'd be good.
Worry about the future.
How about a career that puts you in a dominance hierarchy somewhere, so at least you've got some possibility of rising, some possibility of stabilizing yourself.
why would I interlock stability with dominance hierarchies? Why would I intermix this kind of stuff?
And a schedule and a routine, because no one can live without a routine.
God, it's like he hasn't seen any of my videos or read about the successful lifestyle of the cynics who are the advisors. God, it's like, seriously, Jordan?
You just forget that. If you guys don't have a routine, I would recommend, like, you get one going, because
It's as if he knows he's speaking to the flock who doesn't know that it's very much possible to live routineless. But he's so confident that it's just the flock that won't venture beyond what he's telling them that he doesn't even think he has to cover his bases by like bringing up stuff like, oh, there's these cynics who'd manage that. And then there's this no Avail guy whose videos I never tried debunking because I know that, well, the flock won't hear him.
you cannot be mentally healthy without a routine.
Oh, bullshit.
You need
Routine. Just wait till my Nocturnals video drops, which has now been retitled into Drugs Really Are Mind Expanding, because whatever minimal schedule I may have had before 2.5 years ago when I started doing drugs fairly routinely, that was nothing but a nuisance looking back at it, because I don't even have that semblance of a routine that I had 2.5 years ago, and I'm just so much better off having gotten rid of it. The only routine-related thing in my life is this work crap, and it just so weighs me down. And just listen to him go on and on here.
You need a family, like the family you have, your parents and all that. It'd be nice if you all got along. You could work on that. That's a good thing to work on. And then, you know, you probably need children at some point.
Do we?
And that's life.
Ah.
That's life.
Why aren't you pregnant yet? It's like my self-made knock-knock joke. Knock knock, who's there? It's Dennis. Dennis who? Dennis Prager. Ah, Dennis Prager, the nice friendly old Jewish man from PragerU. Sure, I'll open the door for you. How's it going, Dennis? Why aren't you pregnant yet?